Thank you so much, everyone, for turning on your cameras during the breakout. I hope you had a good discussion. So I'm going to do a longer-ish presentation, kind of a deep dive into all of the work that we've been doing. And yeah, I could speak for hours on this, so I'll try to keep it short, but really to give you an idea of what we've been doing. So to get started, this is a little story I like to share at the beginning of my presentation. I've had the privilege to work with this group and this building for many years, as long as I've been with Happy Cities, which is 5 years. And it's a really special building. It's got a lot going on. I've highlighted some of the innovative features that are included. So we tested a lot of ideas around intentional design for social interaction in this building. There's also a co-housing light development model where a co-housing group actually partnered with a developer to make this building. It's also missing middle infill and passive house construction. So a lot going on. Why I like to share this example is it is an example of this kind of multi-solving that we've been talking about, and an idea of how we can kind of innovate and test these types of design projects. So we were really lucky to get a grant from CMHC to be able to do a deep dive into researching how this building worked. So we kind of tracked the outcomes throughout the process to see, what were the intentional design features that we wanted to do. So some of them were like these social stoops along the main road where we imagined families interacting with each other. This courtyard where kids are playing together all the time. And then these exterior walkways and nooks, which I know maybe work better in Vancouver than in some other parts of Canada. But really the idea that these circulation spaces in our buildings are actually critical social infrastructure and areas to connect. The other really interesting piece is that this building intentionally chose to have this large common house, which is not typical for a 12-unit building. And really this is the heart of their community. And what we really wanted to see was, what does living in a building like this, where you're really intentionally connected with your neighbors, actually do for you? So we did long-term tracking of people's social well-being outcomes. We developed a methodology called a social well-being post-occupancy study, which we have tested in a bunch of other buildings now. But really, we want to understand how people socialize in these buildings, how they interact, and how they feel with different design features. So interestingly, in our kind of research findings, we found that after people had moved into this building and lived there for a while, 100% of people reported feeling never or rarely lonely, which was a 60% increase compared to before move-in. So that was pretty exceptional. And then we also found that as we thought, these areas where these circulation spaces were really important. So 88% of people have kind of daily or almost daily interactions on these walkways with their neighbors. So pretty interesting findings. And what we're really talking about here is we've been on the search for these intentional communities, what we call intentional communities. And these are communities, as Michelle said, where people are really relying on their neighbors for many different things. So they're maybe aging in place and their neighbors are helping them do that safely and comfortably. Maybe they're a busy family with kids and their neighbors watch their kids once in a while. At our urban village, there's a really nice friendship between a 5-year-old and someone who's in their 80s, and he goes over and knocks on our door and eats snacks and watch TV every day. So pretty nice kind of like relationships that we see happen in these buildings organically. They also share tools and resources. So many of them actually share cars. And a lot of them are busy, so they have these really nice social connections. They know that they have, dinners with their neighbors every couple of days. So really a way to build social interaction right into our lives through housing. And this is kind of what we've been learning from these communities, and what we've been challenging planners and architects is to really say, let's think about our homes as catalysts for social connection. And what we see is when our homes provide these things like a sense of belonging, social connection, joy, we see all of these really great things happening in our lives. So it really is a catalyst for all of these social outcomes that we want. So Happy Cities has been studying this for a long time. We've been studying how both our cities, including the way we lay out neighborhoods, and as well as the way we lay out housing, has really impacts our well-being. And we know that design is really important in how we feel and interact and structure our lives. So we've been working on this idea that social connection is crucial to well-being, and the two go together hand in hand. So as Michelle said, we have a lot of evidence now that is really well published about the importance of social connection. We also know that loneliness in Canada is on the rise. So 3 in 10 people report feeling sometimes lonely, and 1 in 10 often feel lonely. And this is true across demographics. So we're seeing it rise among young people, older adults, newcomers to Canada, people who have lived here for many years. No one is kind of immune to this social challenge. And again, recognizing our kind of hierarchy of needs. So the reason that we are doing our second workshop around affordability is we know that affordable, secure tenure is the greatest kind of predictor of being able to form social connections and social belonging. If you're moving together all the time, if you're moving around all the time, you're not likely to be able to build those relationships with your neighbors. So as I said, we've been lucky to be doing a ton of this research, both with partners like Hey Neighbour Collective and with many municipalities around. So definitely check out the project resource page if you haven't. We publish all of our research, and we want people to read it. So yeah, please check it out. You'll see the our urban village study on there, as well as the study we did with the city of North Van, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And then kind of as a last disclaimer, I did say that design is really important for social connection. There are also other factors like programming, policy, the way that we operate, housing, that also really impact how we connect. So today we're talking mostly about design, but we also do a lot of work, particularly Hey Neighbour Collective, around the programming piece. So if you're interested in learning more about those, there will be opportunities to do so.
Madeline, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second here. I apologize to participants, but we meant to enable the Q&A function on here, but it looks like I can't edit the meeting while the meeting is happening. So if you, as you think of questions, we were going to instruct you to put them in the Q&A box, but I can't turn that on. So please feel free to, anytime while Madeline's talking, put any questions you have in the chat, because we will have a 10-minute Q&A after her presentation. Okay, sorry, Madeline, back to you.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Michelle. That's a good note. Yeah, so this diagram we really created it to help explain kind of the spectrum of different social interactions that happen in buildings. So on the left-hand side at the number 1, you have these what we call spontaneous encounters. This is bumping into your neighbor at the mailbox or the dog park, and just kind of waving hello. Maybe you don't really know their name. And over time, if we design our buildings in certain ways to enable those connections can become more frequent. So maybe you have a really nice feature in the front of your building that kind of slows people down, like a little book library, and you see this neighbor 5 or 6 times, and maybe you finally exchange names. And then this is where, when I talked about the importance of programming, this is where programming really comes into play to form those social relationships. So when we work on something together, for example, a community garden or managing our building together, we start to form these relationships over time. And what we see in communities like our urban village is that they move all the way to the right hand of the spectrum where we see mutual support. So these are all the things like sharing cars, helping each other to medical appointments, being someone's social support system. And we know that a lot of people are looking for this. In Canada, they would love to live in a neighborhood or a building where they can be supporting their neighbors and offering help and receiving help. But this doesn't tend to happen in many of our communities. Another kind of key concept that I want to introduce is social group size. So Maybe some of you have heard of the researcher Robert Dunbar. So Dunbar had the stipulation that there are approximate group sizes where we can naturally have these different types of relationships. So generally, most of us have 2 to 5 people that are really special or close connections. That might be our immediate family or some really close friends. Our medium social networks, which are in the 15 to 50 people. So these are people that we recognize as, in our community. They might be casual friends or acquaintances or people that we like to spend a little bit of time with. And then we kind of have this limit to how many people we kind of recognize and feel comfortable with. And the reason we talk about social group size is this is really important concept for how people feel comfortable socializing or not socializing. And as we look at larger and larger neighborhoods and denser housing forms, this social group size can become challenging. Another really important concept is kind of this idea of balancing privacy, connection, and allowing for social choice. So we all have different levels of interest in connecting with our neighbors, and we all need to feel like we have control over our exposure to social connection as well. So we can do this really carefully through design of transitions between private and public areas, all of these semi-private, semi-public, and overlook spaces. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the concept. We also have been able to do some research around how density and typology impacts well-being. So interestingly, in a study we did in 2023 in Metro Vancouver, we actually found that neighborhood density was not strongly associated with either lower or greater or better well-being. So what that tells us is it's actually the qualities of our neighborhoods and the way that we design them and program them that actually matter more so than density. So you can be happy living in a low density neighborhood, but you can also be happy living in a tower. And this is really important because it kind of amplifies the importance of getting these policies that lead to good design outcomes. Another really interesting piece of research, we did a survey with the city of North Vancouver, and we asked multi-unit housing residents, so people living in apartments and townhouses, where do you kind of most frequently interact with your neighbors? So as we kind of thought of in the Tomo House OUV example, these kind of corridors, lobbies, and circulation spaces are really critical for forming those social connections. As well, this kind of zone right outside the building is also an important piece. And then these like functional amenities like parkades, laundry rooms actually can be an important point for social interaction. We also know that having social spaces at your building, such as an amenity room or a courtyard, means that you'll probably have more likelihood of knowing your neighbors, which in turn, generally people report better overall social connections, greater willingness to ask for help, and also report feeling less lonely. So yeah, introducing our toolkit, we released this last summer. There were many, many minds that contributed to the research that went into this project. And really we designed it for everyone who is interested in learning more about this. So planners, I know we have a lot on the call today, but also architects and designers, market and non-market housing operators, different levels of government, as well as nonprofits and residents and community advocates. So we tried to make this as user-friendly as possible. And you'll see that it's kind of split into 4 design toolboxes. So we have our social edges, as I said, which are a really important place for social interaction. Our social circulation, which we often, design very pragmatically and don't think about the opportunities for connection in those spaces. Our traditional kind of social amenities like lounges and courtyards, and less traditional ones like bicycle spaces and laundry rooms. And then thinking about, what about the design of our private homes also enables these social connections. And we've been talking a lot about outcome-based design with planners and designers. So what this really means is, rather than thinking about, we need, X feature and this feature and this feature to ensure social connection, we're really starting to think about okay, let's think about the social outcomes we want for different residents, and then think about the site, and then how we apply those design features will really depend on how we apply these design principles. So we've got 6 design principles: location, invitation, activation, inclusion, transition, and evolution. So firstly, location. This is really about maximizing the opportunities for social interaction by making sure that we're putting our investment into these spaces in the right place. So if you tuck away an amenity space far away, somewhere where people can't really access it and don't see it every day, they're not likely to see it. But we see this kind of triangulation or co-location of elements as really driving social interaction. So a few examples: courtyard buildings, really great example. We've got, they've purposely, put their exterior circulation, their lobby, their indoor amenity spaces all located within this courtyard. So there's a lot of visibility and kind of permeability between the spaces. And then this other example, which is a project from Fluid, who will be one of our experts later. They have done this renovation of a heritage building in Vancouver into multifamily, and they've used these kind of mixed use functions. They've put, this prominent office space on the corner, so really trying to activate these spaces and creating those neighborly social connections along with their social state. Second is invitation. So we really want to maximize these spontaneous daily encounters by designing places to pause and interact, using the built environment as an icebreaker for social connection. And we hear this all the time. Community gardens, kids, and pets as like great icebreakers. So, if someone has a dog, suddenly you're much more comfortable talking to them. Or if someone is working on their community garden plot, you feel a lot more comfortable saying hello. So we know that the way we design these environments can be a social cue to invite us to connect. This really great building is kind of a seniors community, and they've created this outdoor seating area, which is co-located with their amenity space as well as their lobby. So this is a really inviting kind of place to come home to, even if that day you're not feeling so super social. Just being beside social interaction is also beneficial for our mental health. So activation. This is really about creating interesting and functional spaces that can become the heart or center of the community. And really thinking about what are people going to be doing in this space? Why would they choose to visit it? So you'll see in this courtyard example, we've got a lot going on. We've got an indoor-outdoor connection to the courtyard. We've got visual connections to the courtyard with the balconies, direct access to the laundry room, an informal play area with public art, and community gardens. So there's a lot of reasons why you would want to join the fun in the space and kind of spend time there. Inclusion. So this is really about thinking about how people with different accessibility needs and ages or backgrounds will feel in a particular space. And thinking about how we reflect cultural preferences and identities in these spaces as well. This is another senior building, so they kind of recognize that seniors like to take their time walking down the hallway. They've created this wider hallway also to provide space for people with mobility devices. They've got these nice handrails, some natural light. So you feel really comfortable walking through this hallway, taking your time. They've got these really nice intentional seating areas where you can sit and read your newspaper. There's a community notice board with the events happening at the building. And you'll see they've made the space really nice with the wood ceiling and the lighting and the artwork. So really creating those little pockets of invitation to connect. Transition. So this goes back to that concept I was talking about, which is our desire to have some control and autonomy over our social exposure. So really about balancing high quality, livable private homes with the common spaces and thinking thoughtfully about the transition. So we could do this through, active edges with stoops that have a bit of separation between the public realm and the private building. And then thinking about things like acoustics, and light and flexible and functional layouts in our units. So making sure that people's homes are really comfortable, then they're much more likely to feel happier overall in the building and have more positive interactions with their neighbors. And acoustics are one piece that is really important and that we hear a lot about. And finally, this last concept, evolution, which is really about nurturing a sense of belonging through stewardship of commons, and helping people take ownership and feel like spaces are theirs to use and meet their changing needs with it. And this is something that happens really well in co-housing communities. So this is another example from Driftwood Village Co-housing in North Vancouver. Right now they have a really big group of little kids living in the building, so they've chosen to use this room for a kids activity room. They also had a lot of people who were interested in working with tools, so they've also intentionally created this workshop in their parking garage. So just thinking about how they're going to evolve and use those spaces intentionally over time. So the big kind of challenge for us is we know that there are a lot of great architects in Canada. We have a lot of really great design ideas for social connection. How do we translate this into policy? And this is kind of the big question of the day. So we've been working with a lot of different groups to try to understand this. Right now, I think most of your jurisdictions probably have regulation for amenity space around, you need so many square feet or square meters. Sometimes you might have guidelines that aren't mandatory and sometimes are unclear if they're mandatory or not. Or you might have a lot of layers of policy that might be adding complexity to decision making. And we also see kind of variable design outcomes emerge from these policies. So this is kind of our piece of work and bringing it all together. We're really working on this advocacy and education piece right now, building the business case for why we need to do this and why we can do this. So coming back to our second workshop where we're going to talk about the affordability and say, how do we build this intentionally into all of our projects? Removing barriers, so that's on kind of the policy side that you have a lot of control over. And we really want to make this the standard. All of our buildings should think about social connection and well-being as core parts of the design decision.